My name is Jeff Zielinski. I'm with inHealth Ambulance Service. I've been an EMT for 11 years, and we started looking at different ways to not only train our current staff, but also the students that we have in our EMT courses. So there's a huge shortage of EMS just kind of across the country right now. So new and exciting ways to get more people involved is just something that we as a company wanted to look into. When I came across Acadicus, this really seemed like it was a perfect fit for exactly what we're looking for, kind of a custom platform to build anything that we need. This is basically our playroom, so this is just for all of our learners to be able to come in, be able to pick things up, move them around, see exactly how everything operates in the VR space. So we've just entered our first live scene. So this scene is a distraction scene. We call this tunnel vision. So this is to get our brand new EMTs and students that are in EMT courses their first experience inside of an EMS scene and try to raise their awareness. We want them to start addressing this patient over here when in fact there's another patient inside of this same space. So hopefully not only are they going to be interested in the bugs on the floor, the trash that's around, the house that's in disarray, but we want to get them distracted by medications. We want to get them distracted by our actor who will be playing this patient right here. So once they've identified that this may not be the correct patient, we want to get them to start navigating into this space where we see on the floor his roommate. It's a little bit harder and a lot more space consuming to try to do this in a real life situation. So we'll have 3 to 4 persons inside of this module, and they're specifically going to focus off the fall on the bucket. Basically just making it more engaging and a better way to remember as you're going through A&P. You can go through it in a book all you want, but it's hard to remember all of those bones for a brand new learner. I think we're all battling in a classroom environment, the ability to stay engaged, especially for long periods of time. So one of the great things about VR is you can put someone in a new reality, but it ultimately doesn't have to take away from the learning. I checked out a number of products when we were going to make our purchase. There was a few prepackaged programs that the user selected. Yep, this is what I want this person to say, and then there's this outcome that's already pre-programmed in there, and it's there's just not any flexibility. It didn't really have a whole lot of value to me. I think someone would walk through it once, be done with it, and as opposed to this, you can always keep it fresh. You can always update it. You can always kind of make new things, and kind of let your creativity work for you in that sense. My hope is that they're going to walk away and really remember being here, and really take away something and really learn their anatomy a whole heck of a lot better, and their ability to communicate with other professionals a whole heck of a lot better. Because once you have to present up here in front of your big models, in front of your entire class, you're going to want to sound like a professional. You want to be impressive, and we want to give them the opportunity to try to impress their class. And hopefully when they're giving their IHERNs, when they're giving their information to the hospital, they're bringing their patient, they're going to be able to talk intelligibly, be able to talk specifically about injuries and injury locations. That's the goal with this. People have different places they work out of. It's nearly impossible to get everybody together, but just by having some of this VR equipment available at each base, we can actually get people connected. We can work with the nurses at the hospital. They're interested in now being able to do simulations and scenarios with our team. So the potential from working from an emergency at the house to then what that would look like when that care is transferred over to a nurse in the ER, to maybe one of their doctors wants to get in on it as well. It's kind of like the sky's the limit, because we would never be able to invite everyone at the same place, take them out of work, but if they can stay at work, dedicate 30 minutes of their time, it's really not that big of a detriment to the staff overall, and work these scenarios out together inside of different organizations or within a organization that spans across a larger geographic area. We only grow if we're all kind of sharing content, and we're all trying to incorporate each other into this VR space. So if we're all sharing each other's work, I think we're going to elevate a heck of a lot faster and really build a platform that everyone is going to benefit from. Thanks for having me, John. My name is Jeff Zielinski. I'm with inHealth Ambulance Service. I've been an EMT for 11 years, and we started looking at different ways to not only train our current staff, but also the students that we have in our EMT courses. So there's a huge shortage of EMS just kind of across the country right now. So new and exciting ways to get more people involved is just something that we as a company wanted to look into. and see if there was any benefit. So when I came across Acadicus, this really seemed like it was a perfect fit for exactly what we're looking for, kind of a custom platform to build anything that we need to, kind of bring new people into the space, hopefully get them excited about EMS.
Excellent. Very cool. And so when you started working with Acadicus, you had started early on experimenting with the scene editing tools, and you've been able to create some pretty interesting and elaborate scenes that I thought were very innovative uses of the platform. And I was curious if we could, today we'll go on a tour and share some of the different scenes that you've created. I'm interested in sort of learning a little bit more about the objectives in these scenes, like this scene that we're in right now. Could you kind of give us a walkthrough and what this scene that we're in right now is all about?
This is basically our playroom. So this is just for all of our learners to be able to come in, be able to pick things up, move them around, see exactly how everything operates in the VR space. Be just a little bit impressed, you just get to know everything, and move through all of these different assets that are inside of this Acadicus VR platform. So with our models right here, this is going to be something that's utilized in some of our later learnings. So we want them to be very accustomed to how to use these models. So just to be able to play with the buttons, see exactly how they work, and see how you can isolate different body parts in some of these models, that'll be essential for some of our future tasks that we're going to be doing in Acadicus. The other assets that you see kind of over here on the table, again, is just to kind of get a feel for that these are assets that are inside of this world, and we want them to have the opportunity to play with them when it's not really a live environment. So ultimately we'll have maybe 2 people in here, maybe 3, just to move around, play, learn the controls, find out how to move in the VR space, pick things up, put them down, and that's about it for this area. The idea is to get them in here quickly, orientate them, and then get them out to our learning space.
Very cool. Well, that is excellent. So you've got sort of like one of everything in here, kind of a sampling of different things you can do and see, and got some of the organs over here. We've got our multiple casualty patient, and
especially an asset like this, it's just going to have a certain wow factor that people don't always realize is available to them in VR. So this is one of the items that people tend to first walk up to and just really want to play with and look inside and just kind of be amazed at the platform. Hopefully get them a little bit excited while they're learning how to, navigate in this new space.
Excellent.
Cool. Do we want to jump into something else?
Yeah, let's take a look at the next scene.
Awesome. All right, so let us jump to the next scene. So we've just entered our first live scene. So this scene is a distraction scene. We call this tunnel vision. So this is to get our brand new EMTs and students that are in EMT courses their first experience inside of an EMS scene and try to raise their awareness of not only addressing a patient, but making sure to identify everything in your environment and make sure you are, in fact, addressing the scene around you. The idea here is to make sure that anyone that comes through this door, we want them to start addressing this patient over here when, in fact, there's another patient inside of this same space. So we want to get our users to get accustomed to the fact that not every scene you go to is going to have a truthful and honest patient. Not every scene you go to is going to have individuals that are helpful and honest, and you're going to be able to get in and get out with treatment. We want them to spend time in this space, get distracted, and then hopefully work through those distractions and find the actual patients that's inside of this space that we're in here right now. So hopefully not only are they going to be interested in the bugs on the floor, the trash that's around, the house that's in disarray, but we want to get them distracted by medications. We want to get them distracted by our actor who will be playing this patient right here, who doesn't know why you're here. He doesn't believe you should be here, and he's going to try to get you to pick up the home, pick up the house, and make it accessible for him in the wheelchair. So he obviously looks like he could possibly be a patient, but his backstory is he's actually just returned from the hospital. So we want our folks to spend as much time here as possible working with this gentleman when in fact the other room is where our real emergency is. So once they've identified that this may not be the correct patient, we want to get them to start navigating into this space where we see on the floor his roommate, and this is actually the individual that we want to eventually find. So this is a gentleman who called 911 but was unable to give any information because he had suffered his emergency immediately after dialing. He's on the floor. His roommate never knew he was home, so he's going to offer very little to no information and try to get us kicked out of this house. So as you can see, we're trying to promote the idea of navigating throughout your entire scene, looking for any indication of additional patients when you're just not getting the information that you need in any particular environment. So this gentleman will try to get us to help him get out of the house and get on our way when in fact we do have a patient who's lying here on the floor and he's the one suffering the true emergency. So that's how this tunnel vision scenario works. It's meant for our brand new users into EMS to just get them to ask more questions and get them to work through distractions.
Oh, that's excellent. So you use a variety of different, you're combining a variety of different assets and scenes. So this environment setting is originally an assisted living facility for another scenario, and then we've got Miles Johnson, who is a dynamic cardiology patient that we developed for Madison College. We've got the DNR bracelet that we developed for CVTC for their end-of-life scenario. This is Bjorn from the nitroglycerin administration case that we're building for OpenRN. We've got the Mars rover shrunk down here, which is so cool. So even the helicopter flies, so it's maybe like a little remote control toy that this gentleman is playing with. But that was for a botany class that we did on Mars, a really interesting course. We've got some of the safety hazard assets from another safety hazard identification. We've got Miles Johnson and his wife, Karen, who, and I think that was a strategic placement of this frame, because if you look carefully, that's not this guy. So it's sort of a clue, like you had mentioned earlier when we met before, that kind of gives you a clue, like, where's that guy? Maybe he lives here and maybe he's the reason why you were called. So it's just a really interesting combination. We've got a backpack that we built for NSU's like soccer stadium disaster. We've got x-rays that Dr. Slayman's been using. Just a really interesting combination of a lot of different assets that were from a lot of different scenarios, but you've been able to combine them in a very interesting way here.
Yeah, and you're 100% right about that photo. I do want you walking in and treating this like real life, and I want you to ask, well, hey, that is not the gentleman that I'm looking at right here. And since he's not offering me any real legitimate information saying, no, I did not call 911, why are you in my house? If you look at the clock, it's, almost 1 in the morning. Why are you here so late? What are you doing? Well, since you guys are here, why don't you make yourself useful? Help me, pick up around the house because I can't get around in this wheelchair. So I want to get my people distracted, helping this gentleman make a nice, safe path of travel for himself, before they leave for the day. And all the while, he's just their distraction, trying to keep them from the real emergency. So this is all about distraction. That's the whole goal of this scenario. So the more props, the better. His backstory is he was just recently in the hospital. He doesn't want to go back to the hospital. He was just diagnosed with COVID. He doesn't want you here. He wants you to get out so he can finish watching his TV and just ultimately be your distraction in this scenario. So that is the goal. Try to get our new folks acclimated to. Not everyone is cooperative. Not everybody knows everyone inside of their own house. This gentleman may have been napping when he came home, doesn't even know he's back home. So to keep their eyes peeled, keep their eyes open, and make sure that they're doing a good assessment of their environment.
Oh, that's an excellent use case. I think that'll work quite well. I know I certainly fell for it when I first came in here. I walked right away in and I thought, okay, we've got a patient set up here, and I don't think I caught it at all. That there's actually another patient over here, and that's really who you're here to work with. So that's an excellent exercise. Have you run that simulation with physical mannequins and physical reality, or is this a new case that you built specifically for VR?
No, this was built specifically for VR. It's a little bit harder and a lot more space-consuming to try to do this in a real-life situation. And then having the actors available, everyone being able to meet in the same place and, try to develop this. This is just a much better platform for this type of activity. So as I started building, that's really VR was the inspiration for building something like this.
Got it. Very interesting.
So do we want to jump into our next scene here?
Yeah, let's go check it out.
Awesome.
So we're on Mars. Oh yeah, and the fall safety assets that we did for the American Society for Safety Professionals and LJB had worked with those. So what did you create with these assets? This looks really interesting.
So I actually found these assets while going through the libraries, and I thought they were just so interesting because it showed someone in the stage of a fall. So I thought, what a great idea to try to simulate the various stages of a fall so that we have learners, people in EMT classes, who can now take that fall and somewhat live that experience and see what type of impacts we can expect when we're coming to a fall victim, whether it's a fall off a bucket, off a table, off a chair. We're all going to have different impacts and different injuries. So because we have different impacts and different injuries, it's a great way to learn some anatomy because there's going to be different impact points, different primary and secondary fall-related injuries. So the goal is for them to identify those injuries and now be able to take their bodies or their anatomy and muscular systems and say, hey, okay, we see what impact happened, what part of the body was affected, and now I can kind of better learn my anatomy when I'm going through it because I remember my slip and fall, Paul, we had a humerus, we had maybe his flank, and it was this rib or this femur or this tibia. So we want to just get them a little bit more familiar with anatomy and physiology so as they go through each one of their simulations or each one of their various fall modules, if you will, they're going to start learning their anatomy and physiology. They can just take these bodies with them as they go over and assess a fall and say, you know what, I think this is what's been affected. I think that's what's been affected. This is a student-led training. So each group of students will be assigned their own module, so to speak. So we'll have 3 to 4 persons inside of this module, and they're specifically going to focus off the fall on the bucket. So looking at this fall, we can see that he was standing on his bucket, that bucket tilted towards the side. Now we see that he is going to be hitting the ground. It looks like we're going to have an impact to the elbow. We're probably going to have an impact to the head with the bucket. We're also probably going to have an impact to the hip. So the first thing that's about to hit is probably going to be his elbow. Then we're going to see that hip and probably that head onto the bucket. We'll probably have some small secondary injuries to this knee as well. And that hip will probably be a little bit less significant too and somewhat of a more secondary injury. So then our learners will identify where those impact points will be. They'll take their bodies and then they'll find out what exact systems or what bones have been or what we expect to be injured in here so that they can be more acclimated with that body system and how that fall will affect them. So we're going to expect our impact points to be here. We're going to expect impact points here. We're going to expect impact points here. So I want to identify all the bones that have been involved for those injuries, as well as my muscle groups as well, and then also the different parts of the cranium. So I can take my guides here and start learning these parts of the body as I'm dissecting this fall. Basically just making it more engaging and a better way to remember as you're going through A&P. You can go through it in a book all you want, but it's hard to remember all of those bones for a brand new learner. So this kind of puts it in perspective or puts it in reality where they're working with some hyper-specific areas to where they should better remember exactly what they're trying to learn here, which is just the names of these bones, so the names of these muscles, the names of these cranial parts, and hopefully better reinforce those. Now, to elaborate on it further, as our learners become more accustomed to the names of these bones, we then want to have them create their own IHRN based off this patient's fall or this person's fall. So our learners, once they're done and they've assessed their particular fall module, they now have to present this to the class. So if you have one person in VR, we do have other people that will be scribing kind of the information who are on their desktop computer so that they can say, this is what we expect are our injuries, and now we're ready to present to our class. So we'll walk over here to our presenting stick, and it's going to be their job to then competently express what type of injuries they had, what type of fall they had, what type of injuries they expect on these different bodies. So if they even expect that there was injuries to an organ system, It's going to be identifying that, pointing that out to the rest of the crowd, so that our learners can now get that experience of explaining the injuries that they found and kind of expressing their new knowledge that they've learned as far as anatomy, the musculoskeletal system, and just kind of the cranial parts. So you can see we have a lot of different falls, so we'll have a lot of different types of injuries, and the goal of each and every one of them is for each group to come up and give an explanation of what type of injuries they expect their particular module to have received, so that they can better start understanding when they're getting dispatched to a fall patient, what types of things they want to be on the lookout for, because you have primary and secondary injuries. So again, we want to try to avoid tunnel vision. We want to try to avoid just one particular part of the body on a fall, maybe the most obvious. It might not be the most severe injury. So we want to give them an idea of dissecting a fall, what a fall really looks like, and keeping them aware of primary and secondary injuries to make sure that nothing is missed when dispatched to a fall in an emergency environment.
Wow,
So if
I
we
can
want
see
to take
this
even
certainly
just
being a very memorable and engaging way to learn anatomy.
absolutely, I mean, anatomy is easy for some, difficult for others, and to be able to make it more tangible was the goal here.
Could you speak to your decision to use Mars as the environment to stage this in?
Yeah, I wanted to have something impressive. I wanted my students to remember where they were, what they did, and just have a fun experience that this is related to. I think we're all battling in a classroom environment, just attention span of learners and students, the ability to stay engaged, especially for long periods of time. So to try to make something that's just utterly unique and something that they want to explore but's not distracting, I thought was going to add value to this. So being on Mars, not only does that make it memorable, but hopefully while they're here, it just kind of perks them up a little bit right when they're here, wondering what the heck is going on in this space. That's one of the great things about VR is you can put someone in a new reality, but it ultimately doesn't have to take away from the learning.
That's fascinating, and I could definitely see how using Mars as the environment is going to set a memory hook, effectively, that you're in such an unusual environment that it's going to be, helpful in, aiding in the recall of that information when you're trying to remember it later. And just having such an unusual place to be able to learn like this. It's sort of like a memory palace in a certain way. There's a concept of you can associate memories with given places in order to aid in recall in its simplest form. But that's basically what you've done here is you've created a kind of memory palace using Mars to learn about anatomy, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no one will confuse what they did here today.
That's right.
They won't confuse it with another subject matter. This will be very unique.
And I haven't forgotten when you first showed me this. I've been thinking about it ever since. It really does get stuck in your mind because most people just haven't seen the juxtaposition of anatomy and Mars. So it kind of okay, yeah, you're definitely going to remember what you experience here. That's very interesting.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't think, as far as the strategic, goals that we set out to build Acadicus with, we could have built an application where things were sort of pre-programmed, when we're taking guidance from customers or building things that we think have a certain size market or whatever. But what we did, we decided to build a sandbox instead to give our customers the tools to be able to do whatever innovative, unique, and interesting things that they want to do, and try to get out of the way as best we can and provide them with the tools and the content that they can use. And that's exactly what you've done here. And I think not in a long time would we have ever thought of this use case when we were building Acadicus, where somebody someday might take Mars and actually use it for anatomy training. We wouldn't have thought of that, but yet this is a very interesting use case. So it worked out well, and I'm really excited to see how you've been able to use this.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer kind of any scenario that you build, there's a science to it, but there's also an art to it. And having that open sandbox, it really does kind of play to the art side of things, right? Building free form and trying to engage your users. And then there's the science part of the actual treatment and the decisions that you make. And it's so tough to make a uniform program to do that. So to have this type of flexibility and then build more specific products kind of within that, kind of start flexible and then hone in on what you want, is kind of what I really liked. I checked out a number of products when we were going to make our purchase. There was a few prepackaged programs that the user selected. Yep, this is what I want this person to say, and then there's this outcome that's already pre-programmed in there, and it's there's just not any flexibility. It didn't really have a whole lot of value to me. I think someone would walk through it once, be done with it, and as opposed to this, you can always keep it fresh. You can always update it. You can always kind of make new things, and kind of let your creativity work for you in that sense. Building something like this, I didn't necessarily go into Mars saying I was going to do this. I was more or less searching in the assets and seeing what can I build with the material that's available to me. And this started just kind of manifesting itself, and I just built on it and built on it. And I think it's going to be very memorable for our students. So that's my hope, is that they're going to walk away and really remember being here, and really take away something and really learn their anatomy a whole heck of a lot better, and their ability to communicate with other professionals a whole heck of a lot better. Because once you have to present up here in front of your big models, in front of your entire class, you're going to want to sound like a professional. You want to be impressive, and we want to give them the opportunity to try to impress their class. And hopefully when they're giving their IHERNs, when they're giving their information to the hospital, they're bringing their patient, they're going to be able to talk intelligibly, be able to talk specifically about injuries and injury locations. That's the goal with this, is to try to get everyone to dial in their vernacular, so to speak, so that we can, kind of elevate ourselves as professionals. It's way different to say, oh, I'm bringing in John, and he's got a cut on his leg, than I'm bringing in, this 54-year-old patient who has a laceration to his, left calf, and we've seen impact to his right tibia. Whatever. Just to get them to say specifics is the whole goal here. We want to get them to identify all of those little specifics, and hopefully it sticks with them.
I think it will. And we definitely have to bring Frank Emanuel from Cochise College in here to see this, because he's going to be blown away. This was his vision, to create these visualization systems for the muscular, skeletal, and skull anatomy. And then the internal organs, I believe that was a Madison College asset, but showing this to Frank, he would be so blown away. He's also been interested in the idea of changing the scale of these assets. And when he was on one of our events, we had scaled, John Lester had scaled up one of these to be, like 200 stories tall, you're climbing around on it. So changing the scale, and that's what you've done here too. These are not the scale that they come in when you bring them in originally, and you've made them much bigger, and you created these little tiny versions of them for the exercise with each station. So it's a very interesting use of scale that you've done here.
Yeah, the students can walk around with those, and then when they're ready to present, it's the same model, so they're familiar with it. And, I really did like this. I thought this was a great idea because, say we just wanted to, isolate something. Let's say we just wanted to isolate that pelvic girdle, and now, you can go inside and, you can hide and unhide things. Maybe that was maybe not the best one to show off, but here we go. So we have kind of some other parts of the body. So the vertebrae column, we want to isolate it. And you can see the cervical, thoracic, the lumbar, the sacrum, the coccyx. So everyone can kind of identify those places that might be new to them, the things they might not know the name of. He seems to fell on his back. What kind of back? And was there a laceration? Are we expecting some C-spine injuries? Are we expecting a kind of a lumbar injury? Where does one end? Where does the other begin? Try to give them that visual identification so they can kind of just drill that in their head a little bit. We want them just to get to know these parts, so they're living somebody's injury and trying to identify on these modeled bodies, kind of what has been affected by that fall. Hopefully that really drills it into their head, and they always remember, at least the ones they presented on, some of those injuries. I think it'll just better stick to their head.
I think so. Absolutely. Could you speak a little bit? So you had mentioned that there are a number of different sort of like locations where you do training, could you speak a little bit to how you would be reaching or how you might use virtual reality to sort of work with different remote sites?
Yeah. So we have a number of different bases. So people are dispatched out of different locations. People have just different places they work out of. It's nearly impossible to get everybody together, but just by having some of this VR equipment available at each base, we can actually get people connected, people that may not even ever work with each other, which is fantastic because meeting more and more people within your organization, it just builds kind of a better cohesive unit. And that's ultimately the goal. And not only that, but being our EMTs, our paramedics, we can work with the nurses at the hospital. They can borrow our VR sets. They've already started trying out our systems and started trying out our trainings to where they're interested in now being able to do simulations and scenarios with our team. So the potential from working from an emergency at the house to then what that would look like when that care is transferred over to a nurse in the ER to maybe one of their doctors wants to get in on it as well. It's kind of like the sky's the limit because we would never be able to invite everyone at the same place, take them out of work, but if they can stay at work, dedicate 30 minutes of their time, it's really not that big of a detriment to the staff overall. And if they did have an emergency, something they had to leave for, of course, they could just leave the VR space and they are already at work. So it just is flexible. It makes there's more possibilities available of being able to do this somewhat on the fly and work these scenarios out together inside of different organizations or within a organization that spans across a larger geographic area.
So it's going to be able to increase access and bring simulation to people who might not otherwise be able to do it, and also be able to do simulation with people at long distances, potentially from multiple sites all at one time.
Exactly.
Well, finally, what do you see as the future of virtual simulation?
So it's really tough to say where virtual reality and virtual simulation is going to go, but I do feel like the future is going to follow kind of the gaming industries, kind of the entertainment industry, if you will. I feel like those are our biggest drivers right now in this space, and then the educational sector is going to be kind of following closely behind any benefits that or increases that they make to VR overall. We're going to be kind of following behind, so to speak, and trying to use what's developed by the gaming industry. Kind of wherever the money is, I do think that that's kind of where it will go. But I think it's going to a really good space because we're finding a lot more simulations that do engage hand movement and do engage using objects and do engage or do have more model flexibility because these models, they want them to be realistic and do more and more things. So I think that's only a benefit for the medical VR space because the more that we're able to have an entire body built from the inside out to where someone can, have a real life looking penetration, and then that penetration can be treated with a gauze that maybe is actually acting like a cloth, right? I think we're going to start getting more of that realism, and I think that that's going to be just a huge positive. But I do think that as of right now, even just the general use cases that we have here, this is not, us working with any particular body and manipulating it in any way. I think your imagination can do a lot in this space and exposing people to new environments and really just kind of get them thinking is just something that VR can do that's very, very difficult to do in a book. It would be hard to explain this scenario and have someone produce anything of value from it. But to be able to see it, to be able to move through it, to be able to work with these bodies and actually visualize them, the models and the actual bodies themselves, it's huge. So I don't necessarily know where it's going to go. I kind of just went and rambled for a while, but I do think it's going to follow the gaming industry, and I do think that that's a good thing because they're getting a lot more realism and a lot more support.
I agree 100%. In a world where, our industry that we're recruiting from and working within is all the gaming industry. We're using a game engine to build this. We're using game developers to come in and build the content. And, I've often felt like so much energy is spent building, first person shooters, in Call of Duty or, even Grand Theft Auto. It seems like, there could be a counterpoint to those types of environments where there's like people going in and trying to repair and save the lives of all of the damage that's been done inside of those games. You could imagine a medic element to, Grand Theft Auto where we can train paramedics to come in and clean up and, multiple casualty scenarios and all kinds of other training activities. Again, to your point, following along with that game industry direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, this has been great, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and share this with us. And where can people reach out if they want to contact you?
Um, I'm also on the Discord, so you'll see us at inHealth VR1, and then my email address is jeff@indianahealth.care, so not .com, .care. Yeah, so I'm interested in working with more and more people because a scenario like our tunnel vision scenario, we definitely are going to want to try to lean on actors and try to make connections with more and more people who might be interested in doing scenarios like that. I think we only grow if we're all kind of sharing content and we're all trying to incorporate each other into this VR space because it can be intimidating. There can be a lot of work that's involved. So if we're all sharing each other's work, I think we're going to elevate a heck of a lot faster and really build a platform that everyone is going to benefit from.
I agree completely. Thanks again, Jeff, for your time today. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the virtual frontier.
Sounds good.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.